I remember the day she told me to leave as if it happened yesterday. It was quiet in the house, though heavy with the weight of unspoken words. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my cup of tea, hands wrapped around the warmth. My mind was spinning, but my body was calm, numb maybe. She said it so casually, almost gently. "Maybe it's time for you to go," she said. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that shows happiness, but the kind that comes when your heart is so full of hurt that it has no tears left to cry. I wanted to argue. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to run to my son and demand answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, and I smiled. I think she saw it. I think she knew that the smile hid the storm inside me. I had spent so many years trying to understand her, trying to accept her, trying to make peace with the small distance she kept from me. And yet, despite all my efforts, I felt rejected. I didn't know then that the reason she asked me to leave, the reason for her cold words, was not what I thought. Not betrayal, not hate, not malice. It was love. I want to take you back to the beginning, to when I first met her, Emily, my son Adam's wife. Adam had been in love with her for a long time. I watched him through those months, noticing the way he smiled whenever she was near, the way he talked about her to anyone who would listen, and sometimes the way he stared at her silently, as if just being in her presence made the world better. When he first introduced her to me, I tried to be welcoming. I tried to be open. I offered tea. I smiled. I asked questions about her life, her family, her dreams. And she smiled back, softly. But there was a kind of cautiousness in her eyes. She was polite, gentle, kind, but she kept herself at a distance. And I, in my eagerness, did not understand that. I thought she was hiding judgment. I thought she was being careful, because she didn't like me. Looking back now, I realized she was protecting me. For months, I tried to bridge the gap between us. I invited her over for dinner, for tea, even small walks in the garden. I asked about her childhood. I listened when she spoke about her hobbies, her quiet dreams. I laughed when she laughed, and nodded when she shared her worries. I thought I was making progress, and sometimes I felt like I was. But other times, I could sense a wall, a careful wall she built around herself. She rarely spoke of her family. She never shared much about her past. And I, being naturally curious, wanted to know. I wanted closeness. I didn't know then that these small things were clues. Clues that she was carrying burdens I could not see. Clues that she was hiding things, not from me to hurt me, but from me to protect me. I spent my days trying to understand her, trying to understand the woman my son loved so dearly. And sometimes I failed. I judged her too quickly. I assumed the worst. I held onto my own pride, and in doing so, I hurt her without realizing it. There were nights when Adam and I would sit quietly in the living room. He would talk about work. He would talk about his friends. And sometimes he would look at me with a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Mom, she's trying," he would say softly. And I would nod, but I didn't fully understand what he meant. Emily was quiet, yes. Gentle, yes. But she was strong in ways I didn't notice at first. She made sacrifices silently. She carried burdens I could not see. She lied sometimes, to protect me, to shield me, to make my life easier. And I thought she was hiding from me, keeping secrets, being distant. Little by little, the distance grew. And then the day came. The day she asked me to leave. I remember the way she said it. Softly, gently, almost apologetically. "Maybe it's time," she said. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I smiled, because deep down, I felt something I hadn't felt before. A strange sense of peace. I didn't know why, but I would learn soon enough. I want to take you through every moment that led to that day. Every misunderstanding. Every quiet tension. Every small act of love that I failed to see. Because in those moments, in those small, simple, quiet moments, the truth was already there. The truth that she only ever wanted to protect me. I grew up in a home where family was everything. Loyalty, patience, care. These were the pillars of my life. My mother was strict, but her love was steady and unwavering. She taught me to hold family close, to protect them, to understand them, even when it was hard. I carried those lessons into my marriage, into raising my son, into every bond I thought mattered. And yet, I discovered that even the strongest love can be fragile, that even the deepest bonds can have gaps, gaps that sometimes only time, patience, and understanding can fill. Adam was always a gentle soul. He loved quietly. He cared deeply. And when he met Emily, I could see the joy she brought him, the way his eyes lit up, the way he became fuller, happier, calmer. When he introduced her to me, I tried to be open. I smiled, I offered warmth, but I couldn't see everything then. I couldn't see her efforts, her sacrifices, the silent weight she carried to protect me, to protect Adam, to protect our home from pain I didn't even know existed. I didn't notice the first hints of the burden she carried in her quiet pauses, in her soft sighs, in the way she sometimes seemed distant for no reason. She was carrying a burden silently, quietly, lovingly, and I misunderstood it all. Those early days with Emily were calm, peaceful, but beneath that calm, small tensions began to appear. Misunderstandings, little things that seemed insignificant, but slowly created distance between us. I wanted answers. I wanted honesty, and I wanted to believe that every action I took, every effort I made to connect, was enough. But I was wrong. I didn't see the little lies, the ones meant to shield me, protect me. Even when I thought she was keeping secrets, I didn't notice the sacrifices she made quietly. I didn't realize at the time that some truths are too heavy to carry with others around. By the time the day came, she asked me to leave. The weight of those misunderstandings and unspoken truths had grown, though I hadn't yet realized it. I thought I had failed, that I had lost. I thought the gap between us was permanent, unfixable. And yet, in that moment, when I smiled through the hurt, a part of me knew something I could not yet understand. Something that would only reveal itself in time. That smile, the one I forced on myself, was a quiet acceptance of the journey I was about to take. A journey toward understanding, toward seeing the truth behind her words, the love hidden in the silence, the protection hidden in the lies. And it begins with that moment, the moment she said I should leave, a moment that would forever change the way I understood family, love, and forgiveness. Life in our home had a rhythm, quiet but full of small moments that mattered. Days began with the sound of Adam's alarm and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Emily would move around softly, never making noise, always careful not to disturb anyone. At first, I thought it was just politeness, but slowly, I began to see that she carried a careful watchfulness, a constant effort to keep the house peaceful. She never complained, never raised her voice, never demanded attention, yet I could feel her trying to manage everything around her. I mistook her silence for coldness at times, assuming she had little interest in me or the family. But the truth was far different. She was protecting the family from unnecessary tension, from arguments I would later understand she feared would hurt us all. Our mornings were simple. Breakfast together, light conversation, Adam heading off to work, Emily quietly helping me clear the dishes. On many days, I would try to engage her, to ask questions about her life, her family, things that mattered to her. She would answer, but often briefly, her eyes dropping to the floor or moving to the window, as if she were carrying something heavier than the words she spoke. I felt a small frustration sometimes, wanting more connection, more openness. I wanted her to be like a daughter, to confide in me, to allow me into her life. I wanted to believe we were building a true bond. But I often overlooked the care she took to protect that bond by keeping certain things to herself. Evenings were the hardest. After dinner, when Adam and I would sit talking about our day, Emily would quietly retreat to her own space, sometimes reading, sometimes just sitting in silence. I remember thinking one night, why is she always so distant? Why does she avoid being part of our conversations? I didn't yet understand that her distance was not rejection. It was a shield. She feared saying the wrong thing, causing the wrong impression, or revealing a truth too heavy for me to carry. She wanted harmony, and sometimes harmony demanded silence. There were small signs I began to notice, but misunderstood. A pause too long when I asked a question, a gentle sigh that seemed to carry exhaustion I could not explain, a shadow crossing her face, quickly hidden. I would try to draw her out, asking about her day, her feelings, even casual questions about what she wanted for dinner or how she spent her afternoon. And always, her answers were calm, polite, carefully measured. I did not yet know that she had spent hours thinking through her words, choosing each one to avoid pain, to avoid misunderstanding, to avoid burdening me with things she thought I could not handle. I tried to bridge the gap. I invited her to join Adam and me for walks, for errands, for small outings. Sometimes she agreed. Sometimes she hesitated. There were times when I sensed a faint resistance, a hesitation I didn't understand. I would push lightly, thinking she needed encouragement, thinking she needed to open up more. I didn't realize that she was protecting me from truths that could hurt me, from realities I wasn't ready to face. Every polite refusal, every gentle hesitation, every careful smile was a form of care. It was her way of keeping me from worry, from conflict, from unnecessary pain. Adam often tried to explain, though I didn't always listen. "Mom, Emily, she's doing what she thinks is best for us," he said softly one evening, after I had voiced frustration over her distance. I nodded at the time, but I didn't fully grasp what he meant. I still carried assumptions that she was withholding love, that she was keeping me at arm's length for reasons of her own. Little did I know that she had been thinking about my feelings, my comfort, my emotional safety every single day. The things she did not say were as meaningful as the things she did, and I was blind to it. Our weekends were quiet. Adam and I would do errands, clean the house, work on projects, and sometimes Emily would join us. When she did, she was attentive, meticulous, caring. I would notice the way she managed tasks, making sure everything ran smoothly without demanding recognition. I mistook this for being overly controlling or distant, but it was her quiet way of creating peace. She bore responsibility silently, often taking on tasks so no one else would feel burdened, and all the while, she carried her own thoughts, her own concerns, alone. It was in these small moments that misunderstandings began to grow. I wanted more expression from her, more warmth, more visible affection. I wanted her to let her guard down, to show me the depth of her feelings, but she never did in the way I expected. She had learned through experience and intuition that some things are better left unspoken until the right time. And I, impatient and unaware, interpreted her caution as distance, as indifference. I judged her too quickly, failing to see the depth of her care behind the calm exterior. Over time, subtle tensions appeared. Minor disagreements over household decisions, gentle words that were misunderstood, slight hesitations that I read incorrectly. I would notice her quiet sighs and assume irritation. I would observe her careful responses and assume avoidance. And each time, I would inwardly feel frustration, a creeping sense that she was holding something back from me, that she didn't truly want me to be part of the family as fully as I wanted her to let me. I failed to see that these small signs were not rejection, but caution. They were her way of keeping everyone safe, keeping the household peaceful, and preventing misunderstandings before they could grow. I remember one afternoon, when Adam had gone out for a few hours, I asked Emily to help me organize some old papers in the living room. She agreed, and we worked together in silence for a while. After some time, I asked, "Emily, is everything okay? You seem quiet today." She looked at me, eyes calm, and said, "I'm fine, really." But I could see the faint tension in her shoulders. I didn't yet understand that she was carrying worries she chose not to share, because she felt it was her responsibility to shield me from them. I took her words at face value, assumed she was fine, and missed the subtle signals of her careful protection. There were moments, however, that revealed glimpses of her true heart. Small gestures, unnoticed by many, but significant if you paid attention. The way she would leave a cup of tea ready for me without asking. The way she silently corrected small errors I made in tasks, not to criticize, but to save me time or effort. The little notes she would leave, just a few words of encouragement, tucked where I would find them later. These were quiet signs of care, of thoughtfulness, of love hidden in simple acts. I was too focused on the things I misunderstood to notice the depth of her kindness. As the months passed, I began to sense an unspoken tension in the house. Though I could not name it, it was subtle, a quiet undercurrent that seemed to thread through our interactions. I would try to discuss it with Adam, seeking guidance, hoping for insight. "Mom," he would say gently, "Emily is careful because she wants peace. She wants to protect us, all of us." I would nod, but the truth of his words did not fully register. I still assumed she kept distance, for reasons I did not yet understand. Reasons that often felt personal and directed at me. Looking back now, I can see how much effort she made every day, silently, to manage our home, our moods, our relationships. I can see how she anticipated problems before they arose, how she weighed every word, every action, to prevent conflict. She was thoughtful in ways I did not yet recognize, protective in ways I could not yet appreciate. And in my impatience, in my desire for more openness, more warmth, I misunderstood her entirely. I mistook her careful silence for coldness. I mistook her measured words for disinterest. I mistook her restraint for distance. It was a slow buildup, these misunderstandings, like small cracks forming in a wall. No one moment caused the divide, but the accumulation of small, unseen acts of protection, paired with my assumptions, created a subtle, growing tension. I was unaware that each quiet word, each small omission, was a thread of care, woven to prevent harm. I was unaware that she had carried the weight of responsibility for all of us silently, often at her own expense. I was unaware that the greatest acts of love sometimes appear as distance or secrecy, until the right time reveals the truth. And so, life continued in this delicate balance. Days filled with routine, punctuated by small signs of her care I barely noticed. Evenings of quiet conversation between Adam and me, punctuated by her gentle presence at the edge. Careful, observant, protective. Weekends of shared tasks, her hands moving efficiently, quietly, deliberately, preserving peace and comfort for all. And through it all, I continued to misread her intentions, clinging to my assumptions, blind to the quiet sacrifices she made every day. As time went on, the quiet tensions in our household became harder to ignore, though they were never loud or dramatic. It wasn't that anyone argued or raised their voices. Instead, it was in the small things, the brief pauses before she answered, the careful way she phrased her sentences, the way she sometimes avoided meeting my eyes. I would try to interpret these moments, to make sense of them, but I often jumped to conclusions. I assumed distance where there was care. I assumed indifference where there was thoughtfulness. I assumed secrecy where there was protection. And each assumption, unspoken but growing, added weight to the air around us. One afternoon, I asked Emily to help with a minor task in the living room, organizing some old letters and photographs. As we worked side by side, I tried to make conversation, asking questions about her past, about her family, about her childhood. She answered politely, but briefly, always avoiding details. Her tone was calm, measured, almost rehearsed. I felt a pang of frustration, and without realizing it, allowed impatience to creep into my voice. "Why don't you ever tell me more about yourself?" I asked. "I feel like I don't really know you." She paused, the silence stretching just long enough to make me uncomfortable, before she said quietly, "I'm just not used to talking about it." I nodded, but the frustration lingered. I couldn't understand why she kept things so private. I didn't see then that her privacy was her way of protecting me from truths she thought might hurt me, and protecting herself from exposing a vulnerability she had learned to guard carefully. Small disagreements started to appear over minor household matters. I would suggest a way to arrange things, a method to manage chores, or a schedule for tasks, and she would sometimes hesitate before agreeing. Her hesitations, meant to be careful consideration, felt to me like resistance or subtle criticism. I began to feel impatient with her. I began to feel a quiet tension in my chest whenever we interacted, a feeling I couldn't quite put into words at the time. I wanted more openness, more directness, more warmth. Instead, I found myself questioning her intentions. Did she truly respect me? Did she value my presence in the home? I wanted to believe she did, but these small moments made me doubt it. I noticed her carefulness in other ways, too. She would often adjust minor details without saying anything, whether it was correcting the position of a cushion, setting a glass slightly to the left, or arranging a stack of papers just so. At first, I saw this as overly controlling or critical. I failed to see that she was acting out of care. She was trying to prevent small discomforts or avoid potential arguments. She was doing things quietly to make life smoother for everyone, even if it meant her efforts went unnoticed. I misinterpreted her thoughtfulness as distance or judgment, and each misunderstanding added to the growing, quiet tension between us. I also began noticing subtle shifts in Adam's behavior. He seemed more careful in his words around both of us, and I sensed he was trying to mediate without saying anything directly. One evening, after a minor disagreement over household chores, he spoke softly to me. "Mom, please try to see that Emily is only trying to help. She doesn't mean to upset you." I nodded politely, but inside, I still felt frustrated and slightly hurt. I still didn't fully understand the care behind her actions. I still didn't know the sacrifices she was making, the silent burdens she carried to keep our household peaceful. I only saw what I interpreted as distance and coldness, and my mind filled in stories that weren't true. The small tensions began to surface more noticeably in social situations. When guests came over, I observed her interactions closely. She was always polite, always courteous, always careful to maintain harmony. Yet, when I would ask her out her day or try to engage her in deeper conversation during these times, she would often give short answers or redirect the topic. I began to feel excluded. I began to feel that she didn't want me involved in her life as much as I wanted to be involved in hers. My assumptions grew, and my heart slowly began to harbor feelings of resentment, though I kept them buried deep inside. There were moments that should have been joyful, simple family interactions, that were instead tinged with misunderstanding. One afternoon, we were preparing dinner together, and I suggested a slight change to the recipe Emily was following. She hesitated, and then made the adjustment quietly. I took it personally, thinking she was rejecting my advice or dismissing me, though in truth, she was just being cautious not to upset anyone with changes that might not suit Adam's taste. My mind, however, filled in a different story. I felt a growing sense of alienation, a quiet sadness that began to weigh on me more and more each day. I also started to notice her protective gestures toward Adam, things I interpreted wrongly as favoritism. She would quietly check if he needed extra rest, adjust his meals, or handle small tasks for him without asking. To me, it seemed like she was creating a distance between Adam and me, subtly favoring him, while leaving me out. I didn't yet understand that her actions were meant to shield him, and by extension me, from stress and unnecessary conflict. She was carrying a responsibility that I was too unaware to appreciate, and my misinterpretation of her intentions fueled my rising frustration. As weeks turned into months, These small tensions compounded. I found myself internally questioning whether I was truly welcomed in the home, whether my presence was appreciated, whether Emily's actions were driven by care or by a desire to keep me at a distance. I often reflected on past interactions, replaying them in my mind, searching for signs that might explain her behavior. I could not see the truth then, that her carefulness, her silences, her measured responses, were all acts of protection. I did not know the weight of the choices she carried silently every day. I only saw what I feared: distance, secrecy, and a subtle exclusion that I interpreted as personal. One evening, after a day filled with minor misunderstandings, I found myself alone with Emily. I wanted clarity. I wanted openness. I wanted to feel included. I asked gently, "Emily, can we talk? I feel like there's a distance between us, and I want to understand why." She paused longer than usual, a weight in the silence that made my chest tighten. Finally, she said softly, "I am trying, I really am. I just want everyone to be okay, including you." I wanted to believe her words, but I was too caught up in my own assumptions to fully hear their meaning. I nodded, and we continued in quiet tension, each of us holding our unspoken thoughts, mine full of doubt, hers full of care I did not yet recognize. The growing tension began to affect the household subtly. Meals were quieter, conversations more measured. I started noticing the way she would sometimes avoid eye contact when I entered a room, not out of disrespect, but out of caution. I interpreted it as coldness. I began to withdraw slightly, even as I tried to engage, creating a slow drift between us that neither of us intended. Adam noticed it too, and he would glance between us, carefully choosing words to maintain peace. The balance of the household had shifted, though we all tried to keep it calm and functional. Beneath the surface, however, the misunderstanding grew like a shadow, quietly stretching across our lives. I also noticed that Emily began keeping more of her thoughts private, though I didn't yet understand why. She would spend longer periods alone, quietly reflecting, quietly managing the burdens she carried for all of us. I interpreted it as avoidance, as disinterest, as a subtle push to create space between us. I could not see that she was making sacrifices for our emotional well-being, that she was weighing every word and every action to protect me from distress. Her silence was not rejection. It was care. But my eyes could not see it then. Even simple, everyday gestures became points of tension. A cup of tea left in a certain place, a subtle correction to a household task, a quiet refusal to discuss a topic. Each action, small on its own, contributed to a growing sense of unease in my heart. I found myself questioning whether I truly understood her, whether I had misjudged her all along, and whether our bond could ever be what I wanted it to be. I didn't know it yet, but the day that would force all of these questions into the open, the day that would reveal the truth behind her actions, was drawing closer. And when it arrived, nothing in me would remain unchanged. The day everything changed began quietly, just like most days, but I could feel an unusual tension in the air from the moment I woke up. Emily moved about the house as usual, polite and careful, but there was a weight in her steps I could not ignore. I had grown accustomed to noticing subtle signs in her behavior, but this felt different, sharper, more deliberate. I kept telling myself that I was imagining things, that perhaps I was overthinking, but an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. Adam had left early for work, as usual, leaving Emily and me alone. I felt an impulse to finally confront the distance that had grown between us, to ask questions I had been holding inside for months. I wanted answers. I needed understanding. I wanted to know why, despite my efforts, I could not bridge the gap I felt with her. I asked her softly, "Emily, can we talk for a moment? There's something I've been meaning to understand." She nodded quietly, her eyes briefly meeting mine before dropping to the floor. There was a tension in her hands as she folded them in front of her. I felt my heart tighten. I wanted her to speak openly, to remove the walls she had built, but I could sense hesitation. She began slowly, carefully choosing each word. "I need to tell you something, and it's not easy for me," she said. I encouraged her to continue, and she took a deep breath before revealing a truth that would change everything I thought I knew. She told me that some of the things I had misunderstood, the silences, the careful actions, even some of the small deceptions I had noticed, were not meant to hurt me. They were meant to protect me. She confessed that she had withheld certain information about her past, about situations that could have caused me pain or worry, and that her actions had always been guided by a desire to maintain harmony in the family. My first reaction was disbelief. I wanted to argue, to tell her that she had no right to decide what I could or could not handle. I wanted to tell her that honesty should have come first. But as I listened, I realized that the weight she had carried silently for months, perhaps years, was far greater than I could have imagined. She had been protecting me, shielding me from truths I was not yet ready to face. I remember the moment clearly when she said, "I lied because I knew the truth would hurt you, and I couldn't bear to see you in pain." Those words hit me harder than anything I had expected. I felt a mixture of relief and guilt, anger and understanding, swirling inside me. All the misunderstandings, the small resentments, the frustrations I had felt over time, they suddenly made sense. The pauses, the quiet hesitations, the careful gestures, all of it had been her way of keeping peace, of protecting me from burdens I had not been ready to carry. I wanted to cry, but my body felt frozen, unsure whether to release tears of relief, guilt, or love. I was overwhelmed by the realization that I had judged her wrongly for so long, that I had misread the intentions behind her every action. As she continued to explain, I began to understand the depth of her sacrifice. She had made choices that she knew would make her seem distant, choices that she knew I might misinterpret, all to keep our family safe and harmonious. She had carried burdens on my behalf, shielding me from difficult truths, while quietly ensuring that Adam and I felt loved and cared for. I had assumed distance, but it was care. I had assumed indifference, but it was protection. The revelation left me speechless, caught between remorse for my misjudgments and awe at her quiet strength. I struggled to speak at first, my mind racing to reconcile the years of assumptions with this sudden clarity. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She looked at me gently and said, "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was helping. I thought that by keeping certain truths from you, I could protect you and help maintain peace in the family." I wanted to argue, to insist that honesty was always better, but I couldn't. I could feel the sincerity in her words, the love behind her actions, and I realized that everything I had taken for granted, everything I had misunderstood, had been guided by care and consideration. I felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude and guilt wash over me. I had judged her too quickly. I had misunderstood her intentions. I had carried resentment where there should have been understanding. The revelation forced me to reflect on all the interactions I had shared with her over the months and years. Every pause, every gentle correction, every quiet act of service. Suddenly, I saw the hidden love in them. I remembered the afternoons we had spent together quietly working on tasks, the evenings she had carefully ensured our comfort, the small gestures I had overlooked or misinterpreted. All of these moments, which I had once thought were distant or indifferent, were now revealed to be acts of quiet devotion. I felt a deep pang of remorse for the assumptions I had made and the moments of unfair judgment I had allowed to cloud my perception of her. I realized that I had misunderstood her completely. I began to see that my own expectations had caused much of the tension. I had wanted more openness, more warmth, more visible affection, but I had not recognized that love can exist in many forms. Some love is loud and visible, while other love is quiet, careful, and protective. Emily's love was the latter. Her actions, which I had misread as distance or secrecy, were expressions of care that I had been too blind to notice. The realization was humbling. forcing me to confront not only my misunderstandings of her, but also my own limitations in recognizing and appreciating the subtle ways people show love. As the conversation continued, Emily shared specific examples of times she had withheld information or acted cautiously to protect me or maintain peace in the household. I listened, each revelation layering on a mix of surprise, guilt, and admiration. I recalled the moments I had felt excluded or frustrated, and I realized that those feelings had been the result of her careful choices, decisions made out of concern for my well-being and the family's harmony. The depth of her thoughtfulness, the weight of the responsibilities she had silently assumed, left me overwhelmed. I began to understand the sacrifices she had made without complaint, the silent labor of care and love that I had failed to recognize. In that moment, I felt a shift in my own perspective. The frustrations I had felt, the quiet resentments I had carried, began to melt away, replaced by understanding and gratitude. I realized that her actions, even when difficult to interpret, had been guided by a deep respect and love for me, for Adam, and for the family we had built together. I felt humbled by the enormity of her efforts, and I recognized that my judgments and assumptions had been unfair, fueled by my own lack of understanding rather than any failing on her part. The weight of years of misunderstanding began to lift as clarity settled in. After a long silence, I spoke, my voice soft and trembling. I don't know what to say. I misjudged you. I misunderstood everything. She looked at me with calm eyes and said gently, "It's all right. I only ever wanted to protect you." Her words echoed in my mind, and I felt a profound shift. All the resentment, all the doubts, all the quiet tensions that had built over time suddenly made sense. I began to see that love is not always about openness or visible warmth. Sometimes it is about quiet, deliberate choices made to protect and care for others, even when misunderstood. The revelation changed the way I viewed everything in our home. I remembered the small gestures I had overlooked, the careful planning, the quiet efforts she had made to ease tension, to prevent arguments, to shield me from difficult truths. I remembered the evenings when she had smiled politely while hiding worry, the mornings when she had moved quietly to ensure comfort, and the times when she had sacrificed her own comfort for the sake of the family. I understood at last that the gaps I had perceived between us were not signs of distance or indifference, but expressions of deep, thoughtful care. My perspective shifted completely, and with it came a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a lingering sense of remorse for the years I had misunderstood her intentions. By the end of that conversation, I felt a profound connection that had not existed before. The misunderstanding that had created quiet tension for so long began to dissolve. I realized that the journey toward understanding had begun, and though it would take time to heal the gaps of the past, the foundation of care and love was already there. Emily's actions, once misinterpreted, now revealed a depth of thoughtfulness and sacrifice that humbled me. I understood that the turning point had arrived not through confrontation or argument, but through revelation, honesty, and the quiet power of protective love. After Emily's revelations, I spent hours sitting quietly, trying to process everything she had shared. The weight of my misunderstanding, the years of misjudgment, and the assumptions I had carried pressed on me heavily. I thought about the moments when I had felt frustrated, the times I had interpreted her actions as distance or indifference, and the small resentments that had grown silently in my heart. I realized, painfully, that all of those feelings had been misplaced. She had never acted out of malice or selfishness. She had always acted out of love and protection. The realization brought a mix of relief and sorrow, a combination that left me both grateful and deeply remorseful. I began to replay our past interactions in my mind. I remembered the afternoons we had spent together, silently doing chores, and how I had often felt her presence as distant. I remembered the times she had corrected minor mistakes in a quiet way, and how I had assumed judgment. I remembered her gentle refusals, her cautious words, and her careful actions, and I understood for the first time that all of it had been intended to preserve harmony, to protect me, and to keep the family safe. I felt a deep sense of guilt for having misinterpreted her intentions, for allowing my impatience and assumptions to cloud my judgment. It was a heavy, almost suffocating emotion, but it was also accompanied by a sense of clarity that I had never experienced before. That evening, I found myself walking slowly through the house, thinking about how I had treated her, how I had judged her, and how I had failed to recognize the quiet sacrifices she had made. I remembered the dinners where I had felt excluded, the conversations I had misread, the gestures I had overlooked. All of those moments now seemed to take on a new meaning. Each one was a demonstration of care, each act a silent effort to protect me and ensure the peace of our home. I felt a deep ache in my chest, a mixture of sorrow and gratitude, as I realized how much I had misunderstood and how little I had truly seen. I sought Emily out later that evening, needing to speak with her again, to acknowledge the depth of my misunderstanding. "Emily," I said softly, "I see now. I see everything you've done, and I don't know how to thank you. I misjudged you for so long." She looked at me calmly, her expression gentle, and said, "It's all right. I never wanted recognition. I only wanted peace for all of us." I felt tears welling in my eyes as I struggled to express the emotions I had been holding inside for years. "I was blind," I whispered. "I didn't understand. I thought you were distant. But now I see that it was care. I see that you carried so much, quietly, for all of us." She smiled softly, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of closeness, of understanding, of connection. The emotional weight of this realization continued to press on me over the following days. I found myself reflecting on past arguments, past tensions, and past moments of frustration. Each memory, previously a source of annoyance or misunderstanding, now revealed layers of care and intention that I had failed to perceive. I thought about the subtle ways she had managed our household, the quiet sacrifices she had made, the protective measures she had taken to ensure that no one, including myself, would be burdened unnecessarily. The depth of her thoughtfulness, the enormity of her silent labor, left me humbled. I understood, perhaps for the first time, that love often exists in quiet, invisible forms that require careful observation and patience to truly appreciate. I began to see how my own expectations had contributed to the tension between us. I had wanted more visible affection, more openness, more direct expressions of care. And I had failed to recognize that her love was expressed differently. It was deliberate, careful, protective. It was the kind of love that shields, that waits, that sacrifices quietly. I realized that my impatience and assumptions had created a distance where none truly existed. I had misunderstood her actions, and in doing so, had carried unnecessary resentment and hurt. The realization was both humbling and transformative, forcing me to confront the limitations of my own perception and the need for greater empathy. Over the next few days, I made a conscious effort to observe Emily more carefully, to notice the small gestures and thoughtful actions that had always been there, but had gone unappreciated. I began to see the depth of her care in ways I had never considered, the way she anticipated needs before they were voiced, the way she quietly corrected problems to prevent discomfort, the way she carried burdens for all of us without complaint. It all became clear. Each act, once misunderstood, now appeared as a testament to her dedication and love. I felt a deep sense of remorse for having taken her efforts for granted and for having misinterpreted her intentions for so long. One afternoon, I found myself sitting with her in the quiet of the living room, reflecting on the past and the misunderstandings that had accumulated over time. I spoke honestly. "I can't believe I didn't see it before. I can't believe I judged you wrongly. All these months, all these years, I misunderstood you completely." She responded softly, "It's okay. I knew you would understand eventually. I just wanted to protect you while you were ready." I felt a lump in my throat as I realized how patient she had been, how selfless her intentions were, and how much grace it had required to carry the truth silently for so long. The emotional breakdown I experienced was not one of anger or despair, but of profound realization and release. The years of tension, frustration, and quiet resentment melted into understanding and gratitude. I began to forgive myself for the assumptions I had made, while also acknowledging the depth of Emily's patience and care. I realized that forgiveness and understanding were not one-time acts, but processes that required reflection, empathy, and time. I began to feel a renewed sense of connection, a softening of the emotional walls I had unconsciously built, and a growing recognition of the love that had always been present, though expressed in ways I had failed to notice. As I continued to reflect, I realized that my relationship with Emily and with Adam would never be the same. The revelation had shifted everything. The misunderstandings that had created distance were replaced by clarity. The resentment that had quietly built up over months now gave way to appreciation and respect. I understood that love, care, and protection can take many forms, some of which may not be immediately recognized. I understood that true understanding requires patience, observation, and a willingness to see beyond appearances. I understood that Emily had always acted with the best intentions, even when her actions were misinterpreted. In the days that followed, I made conscious efforts to express gratitude and acknowledgement for the things she had done quietly all these years. I spoke to her more openly, asking questions, seeking advice, and appreciating her insights. I observed her actions more carefully, noticing the thoughtfulness and care in every gesture, every decision, every word. The shift in perspective allowed me to reconnect with her on a deeper level, creating a sense of trust, empathy, and mutual respect that had been missing before. I began to see her not as distant or secretive, but as someone whose love and care were profound, deliberate, and protective. By the end of that week, the emotional weight that had burdened me for so long began to lift. I felt lighter, more connected, more understanding. The breakdown of frustration, resentment, and misunderstanding had been necessary to reach a place of clarity. I understood that the turning point had arrived not through conflict or confrontation, but through revelation, honesty, and the quiet acknowledgement of the love and care that had always been present. I realized that emotional breakdowns can lead to breakthroughs, that moments of deep reflection can reveal truths that had been hidden in plain sight. And that understanding often requires the willingness to see beyond assumptions. The culmination of this realization was both humbling and freeing. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for Emily, for Adam, and for the patience and care that had sustained our family through years of misunderstanding. I felt a renewed commitment to empathy, observation, and appreciation for the subtle ways in which love is expressed. The emotional breakdown had transformed into a quiet, lasting clarity, one that would guide my interactions, my judgments, and my understanding in the days, months, and years to come. I understood that the journey toward forgiveness, understanding, and connection had begun, and that the first step was acknowledging the truth that had been present all along. Emily had always acted out of love and protection. After the turning point, life in our home began to change in ways that were subtle at first, but gradually became deeply meaningful. The tension that had quietly accumulated over months seemed to lift, replaced by a soft calm that allowed me to see Emily in a new light. I found myself noticing her actions not as distant or detached, but as thoughtful, deliberate expressions of care. The way she moved through the house, the way she anticipated needs, and the quiet sacrifices she made all became clearer to me. I realized that love can be hidden in small acts, and that understanding someone often requires patience and careful observation. Slowly, I began to open my heart in ways I had not done before, allowing empathy and gratitude to replace judgment and misunderstanding. I began engaging with Emily more intentionally, asking her questions and listening closely to her responses. For the first time, I truly heard her perspective, and I appreciated the depth of thought she had applied to her actions. I saw that her silence was not avoidance, but protection. I saw that her measured words were not indifference, but careful consideration. I saw that her small gestures, once taken for granted, were demonstrations of love and dedication. Each day, as I became more aware of her intentions, our interactions grew warmer, gentler, and more meaningful. I felt the sense of closeness that had been missing for so long, and I began to understand the importance of patience, observation, and humility in relationships. Adam noticed the change in both of us and expressed his quiet relief. He would often smile and say, "I'm glad things are getting better," and I would nod, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The family dynamic shifted, not suddenly, but gradually, with small acts of understanding, kindness, and acknowledgement. I began to express gratitude for the things Emily had always done quietly: preparing meals in ways I enjoyed, organizing the home, making sure we were comfortable, and carrying burdens without complaint. My recognition of her efforts became more vocal, and I saw her face light up with quiet appreciation, a simple acknowledgement of our renewed connection. Forgiveness played a central role in this transformation. I had carried misunderstandings and quiet resentment for months, but now I could release them. I forgave myself for my assumptions and judgments, recognizing that my perspective had been limited. I forgave Emily for the small omissions and careful secrets she had kept, understanding that they were motivated by care, not deception. The act of forgiveness allowed me to feel lighter, freer, and more open to genuine connection. It was a relief to let go of the emotional burden I had carried and to embrace a new understanding of love and protection. As we spent more time together, I began to notice the ways Emily had built bridges of care and thoughtfulness all along. She had always been attentive to our needs, though quietly, and I had overlooked the depth of her love. I reflected on moments from the past, the evenings when she had smiled politely while hiding concern, the afternoons when she had worked silently to prevent discomfort, the small notes and gestures that had gone unnoticed. Each memory now revealed itself as an act of devotion, a careful effort to create harmony and safeguard our well-being. I felt both humbled and grateful, understanding that love often operates quietly, beyond immediate recognition. Our conversations became more open and honest, yet still gentle and calm. I found that I no longer needed constant explanations or visible expressions of care, because I had learned to perceive love in subtler forms. I began to value the thoughtfulness behind Emily's actions, appreciating the care she had exercised for months without recognition. The small misunderstandings that had once caused frustration were now opportunities for empathy, allowing me to approach her with patience, understanding, and kindness. The emotional distance that had separated us was replaced by a sense of mutual respect and trust, slowly knitting our connection together in a more meaningful way. Adam's role in this resolution was quiet but significant. He continued to act as a bridge between us at times, though less frequently than before. He allowed the two of us to rebuild our relationship organically, providing support when needed, but mostly stepping back. His patience and understanding helped create a safe space for me to recognize Emily's intentions, to process my emotions, and to embrace the depth of her care. I realized that rebuilding a bond required not only acknowledgement and forgiveness, but also time, space, and consistent observation of love in action. It was not an instant process, but a steady unfolding of understanding and appreciation. Over the following weeks, our home transformed from a place of subtle tension to one of calm harmony. I noticed small moments of connection, Emily offering assistance without prompting, leaving thoughtful notes, engaging in quiet conversations, or simply sharing a smile that carried meaning. I learned to perceive these moments as expressions of care rather than distance or indifference. I began participating more actively in household routines, seeking ways to reciprocate her efforts and to show gratitude for her quiet sacrifices. Each gesture, no matter how small, contributed to rebuilding trust, respect, and mutual affection. The emotional resolution was not just about understanding Emily. It was also about personal growth. I recognized my own tendencies to misinterpret intentions, to judge prematurely, and to carry unnecessary resentment. I learned that relationships require patience, empathy, and a willingness to see beyond surface actions. I understood that love is multifaceted, sometimes quiet, sometimes visible, and often expressed in ways that are not immediately obvious. The process of rebuilding our connection allowed me to grow emotionally, to embrace humility, and to cultivate a deeper capacity for empathy and understanding. By the end of this period of reflection and reconciliation, our family bond felt stronger than ever. The misunderstandings and quiet tensions of the past had been replaced by clarity, appreciation, and genuine warmth. I no longer measured Emily's love by overt gestures or immediate expressions, but recognized the depth of her care in the small, thoughtful actions she had always taken. Our interactions were now characterized by patience, understanding, and mutual respect, creating a sense of emotional security and stability that had been missing before. The process of resolution also deepened my relationship with Adam. As I recognized Emily's intentions and forgave past misunderstandings, I was able to approach Adam with renewed respect and appreciation for the choices he had made in loving and supporting Emily. I began to see the family as a network of care, with each member contributing in their own way, sometimes quietly, sometimes visibly, always with the intention of protecting and nurturing the bonds that held us together. I understood that forgiveness, understanding, and appreciation are ongoing practices, essential for maintaining harmony and connection within a family. Looking back, I realized that the resolution was not a single event, but a series of conscious efforts, reflections, and acknowledgments. It required patience, empathy, and the willingness to recognize love in its many forms. I came to appreciate Emily, not only for the quiet sacrifices she had made, but also for her strength, patience, and thoughtfulness. I understood that the misunderstandings of the past had been opportunities for growth, allowing me to develop a deeper emotional awareness and a stronger capacity for empathy. The experience transformed my understanding of love, protection, and the subtle ways in which care can be expressed. As life continued, I found joy in the renewed connection. I engaged more openly with Emily, participating in conversations, household routines, and quiet moments of shared understanding. I expressed gratitude for the thoughtful acts she had performed for years, recognizing that love often requires patience, observation, and acknowledgement. The quiet tension that had once permeated our home was replaced by warmth, calm, and a sense of emotional security. The resolution brought not only peace, but also a renewed commitment to nurturing relationships with empathy, respect, and understanding. Through this process, I learned a profound lesson about the nature of love and care. Love is not always loud, visible, or easily understood. Sometimes it is quiet, deliberate, and protective. Sometimes it requires patience, reflection, and the willingness to see beyond surface appearances. The resolution with Emily taught me that forgiveness, understanding, and acknowledgement are essential for maintaining meaningful connections. I realized that the bonds we share with others are strengthened not by perfection or immediate clarity, but by patience, empathy, and the ongoing practice of recognizing and valuing the care that is always present, even when subtle or hidden. As the days passed, I found a quiet sense of peace settling over our home, a peace that had been missing for far too long. The misunderstandings and quiet tensions that had clouded our lives were replaced by clarity, gratitude, and connection. I observed Emily in a new light, appreciating the care, thoughtfulness, and quiet strength that had always been present, but often overlooked. I realized that the journey to understanding her had taught me more about patience, empathy, and love than any other experience in my life. Each day became an opportunity to notice her intentions, to acknowledge her efforts, and to deepen the bond that had been patiently waiting for recognition. I began to approach our interactions with humility and an open heart. Simple moments, like sharing a cup of tea, discussing household tasks, or walking through the garden, became meaningful opportunities to connect. I no longer sought constant reassurance or visible gestures of love. Instead, I learned to see the subtle ways in which care is expressed. Emily's quiet attentiveness, her thoughtful corrections, and her small, deliberate acts of service became sources of warmth and comfort. I felt a profound gratitude for her patience, her dedication, and the sacrifices she had made quietly, often at the expense of her own ease, to ensure the well-being of our family. Adam noticed the change as well, and there was a gentle harmony in our home that had been absent before. Conversations flowed more easily, laughter returned in soft waves, and even the ordinary routines of daily life felt infused with meaning. I found joy in the simplicity of shared moments, in the quiet reassurance of Emily's presence, and in the renewed sense of connection that now defined our family. I realized that relationships are strengthened not by grand gestures alone, but by consistency, thoughtfulness, and the willingness to see beyond surface appearances. The small, steady acts of love, once unnoticed or misunderstood, now became the foundation of trust, respect, and genuine affection. As I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this place, I recognized the role of patience and understanding in transforming our relationship. I acknowledged my own mistakes, the assumptions, misjudgments, and moments of impatience that had created distance between us. I forgave myself for the misunderstandings I had allowed to fester, and I embraced the lessons they offered. I also recognized Emily's remarkable resilience, her thoughtful discretion, and her unwavering commitment to protect and nurture the family. I understood that love is not always immediate or visible, but it is steadfast, deliberate, and patient. This realization became a guiding principle in how I approached not only my relationship with Emily, but with others in my life as well. In the quiet moments of reflection, I thought about the ways we had misread each other, the small tensions that had grown unnoticed, and the silent efforts that had gone unappreciated. I realized that much of the emotional strain we experience in relationships comes from assumptions, expectations, and a failure to perceive the depth of care behind actions. The clarity I gained from understanding Emily's intentions allowed me to approach relationships with a renewed sense of empathy and awareness. I learned that observing, listening, and patiently interpreting the actions of others can reveal profound expressions of love that may not be immediately apparent. The process of rebuilding our bond was gradual, but deeply rewarding. Each day, I practiced noticing and appreciating Emily's efforts, expressing gratitude and reciprocating her thoughtfulness in small, meaningful ways. I shared more openly, asked questions, and allowed myself to be vulnerable, creating opportunities for deeper connection. I found that as I grew in understanding and empathy, the household became a space of calm, warmth, and mutual respect. The once subtle tension had transformed into harmony, and the emotional atmosphere of our home reflected the care, patience, and love that had always existed beneath the surface. One evening, as we sat together quietly, I spoke softly to Emily. "I never truly understood before, but I see now. I see everything you've done and continue to do for us, and I am grateful." She smiled gently, her eyes reflecting quiet understanding. "I only ever wanted to protect and care for you," she replied. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of connection, a recognition that love often exists in ways that are not immediately obvious, but are profoundly impactful. I realized that understanding, empathy, and acknowledgement are the keys to nurturing meaningful relationships, and that patience and observation are essential in truly appreciating the care that others provide. The journey we had undertaken together taught me that forgiveness and understanding are not one-time events, but ongoing practices. I learned to approach conflicts with patience, to consider the intentions behind actions, and to value the subtle ways in which love is expressed. I understood that relationships require not only visible gestures of care, but also the recognition of quiet, deliberate acts that maintain harmony, prevent conflict, and nurture trust. Emily's example of thoughtful, protective love became a model for how I sought to interact with others, emphasizing empathy, patience, and conscious acknowledgement. As time passed, our home became a place of emotional safety, where misunderstandings were addressed calmly and where gratitude and respect were consistently expressed. I continued to observe, listen, and participate actively in nurturing the bonds within our family. I practiced recognizing the small but meaningful gestures that Emily had always offered, and I responded with acknowledgement, appreciation, and reciprocal care. The emotional environment of our household transformed into one of warmth, support, and genuine connection, reflecting the lessons we had both learned through the journey of misunderstanding, revelation, and reconciliation. Reflecting on the experience, I realized that the most profound lessons in life often come from moments of misjudgment and misunderstanding. They teach humility, patience, and empathy. They reveal the quiet strength and resilience of those around us and offer opportunities to recognize and appreciate love in its many forms. I understood that emotional growth is nurtured by reflection, acknowledgement, and the willingness to see beyond surface actions. Emily's patience, care, and discretion provided a powerful example of how love can be protective, quiet, and transformative. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for her presence in our lives and for the lessons her actions had imparted. In the final reflection, I realized that life is fragile, relationships are complex, and understanding requires effort, patience, and empathy. I understood that love is expressed in countless ways, some subtle, some visible, but all meaningful. The journey with Emily taught me that quiet acts of protection and care are often the most profound expressions of love, even when they go unnoticed or are misunderstood. I recognized the importance of observing closely, listening carefully, and valuing the thoughtful intentions of those we care about. These insights became guiding principles, shaping how I approach relationships, empathy, and connection in every aspect of life. I also understood that forgiveness and gratitude are transformative. By forgiving myself for misjudgments, I allowed space for clarity and growth. By expressing gratitude for Emily's quiet sacrifices, I strengthened the bonds of trust and respect that now define our family. The emotional journey we had undertaken, though challenging, led to deeper understanding, stronger connections, and a renewed sense of love and harmony. I felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the misunderstandings and tensions of the past had been replaced by insight, acknowledgement, and emotional closeness. As the days and months continued, I embraced the practice of noticing and appreciating the subtle ways in which love is expressed. I approached relationships with empathy, patience, and careful observation, recognizing that true care is often demonstrated in quiet, deliberate actions. I nurtured our family bonds with gratitude, openness, and acknowledgement, fostering an environment of trust, warmth, and emotional security. The lessons learned from the journey with Emily became a lasting guide, shaping my understanding of love, care, and the importance of observing and valuing the intentions of others. In the quiet moments, I often reflected on how much had changed, how deeply I had misunderstood, and how profoundly the revelation of truth had transformed our relationships. I realized that love is patient, protective, and often hidden in subtle acts that require attention and understanding to appreciate. I felt immense gratitude for Emily, for Adam, and for the patience and thoughtfulness that had sustained our family through years of unspoken tension. The experience left me humbled, reflective, and deeply aware of the importance of empathy, forgiveness, and acknowledgement in maintaining meaningful connections. As I close this chapter of reflection, I understand that the most important lesson is that love and care are not always loud or obvious. They are often quiet, deliberate, and protective. expressed through thoughtful actions and careful consideration. By embracing empathy, patience, and recognition of subtle acts of love, we can build deeper, more meaningful connections. I have learned that understanding, forgiveness, and gratitude are transformative, capable of healing misunderstandings, strengthening relationships, and fostering lasting harmony. The journey with Emily has taught me that even when love is hidden, it is always present, guiding, protecting, and nurturing the bonds that truly matter. In the end, I carry this lesson forward, not only in my relationship with Emily and Adam, but in every connection I hold dear. I have learned to see beyond assumptions, to value quiet acts of care, and to approach life with patience, empathy, and understanding. I have learned that even years of misunderstanding can be healed through acknowledgement, forgiveness, and the conscious practice of gratitude. And most importantly, I have learned that love, in all its forms, is always worth noticing, appreciating, and honoring, even when it is expressed in the quietest, most subtle ways.